Okay, so in the general sugya of mitzvahs changing in the future of Mashiach comes, you have the famous, you have different categories. One category is where you have a Midrash, for example, the Rebbe deals with this in a Sikha, that it talks about how there's going to be a shechting of the Shoir Habar with the fins of the Leviathan. It's a problem. Why is it a problem? It's a problem because that's not a kosher shchita, al pi Torah. Okay. I don't know din shchita. If you know the way the din shchita, you can't shecht with the fin of a Leviathan.
It's not your shema.
It's not chiddush shchita. It's not a bad shchita. Okay. So you have a few. That's one example of various passages in Chazal. It's not a problem. Why is it not a problem? It's similar to Abarbanel's chazer that we spoke about last week. So Rasha, even today theoretically you have a Rasha. Even without a Navi you could even do that. And that is, a Bezin could come along and say that we feel for a Rasha we have to suspend the mitzvah. But a mitzvah or an Avera for 5 minutes, for 10 minutes, for 20 minutes. So it has a start date, it has an end date. A Bezin has a right to do that. A Navi has a right to do that. Mashiach has a right to do that. So that all of those temporary stuff, easy. You can move. You could deal with that in a very simple way. Then you not connected to Chazer. Our Barbanel does say that the permission to eat Chazer l'asad is only a shah for a few minutes during a war. You're allowed to do it as a special heter. Okay, I'll come back to that in a second. Now you have another type of passage, very famous. It's a tradition that started with the Arizal. The Arizal said l'asad lava, the Allah is going to be like Beishama. Well, is that a problem? Not a problem at all. Why? When do Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel have disagreements? They never have a disagreement on a kud of Torah Shebeksav. I'll explain what I mean in a second. Nor do they ever have a disagreement on the pirush of Torah Shebeksav, the basic pirush of what each mitzvah means, which is what's not changeable. Where do they have disagreements? They have a disagreement on when there's something the Torah doesn't say. Are you allowed to, first of all, dinim darabana, Chanukah, you can light the menorah this way, that way. So it's in the Rabbana. That's where they're having debates. We're totally okay changing. We're totally okay. And theoretically, even Bezman Agalos, you could change from one to another. You have Sanhedrin, whatever. But we're totally okay changing a rabbinic law. And then you have the derived laws. It's Taka Din Deraisa, but he learned the Gzeir Shava this way. He learned the Gzeir Shava the other way. Okay, that's also subject to change. We're totally okay changing. So what's Arizal saying? That when Mashiach comes, Sanhedrin is going to say, let's take another look at this, and we have deeper understanding now, and we could be more machmir because people could live at a higher standard, and so therefore they're going to change. So that's another case. That's a famous Sikha, the Rebbe, Shavuos Tafshin on Aleph, Torah Chadashim Ita Teisei, where the Rebbe discusses both of these past Nekudas that I just mentioned, meaning the Hayrah Shah explanation, and the changing of overturning the law, because it's in areas that were lechatchila you're able to experience change. All of this doesn't work, the pashtus for the chazer. And here we have this passage, and we trace the history of this passage, and in summary we saw that there was a passage in Midrash that we don't have today, but there was a passage in Midrash that going back at least to the 1300s, Jews understood this passage that we don't have today to mean that they're going to be able to eat chazer l'asad. And that's a big problem. Why? Because that's not Hayrah Shah. A Barbanel says, it's only Hayrah Shah. Fine, but that's not Bapashtas what it sounds like. So it's not Hayrah Shah. It's not a Gzeira Shava. The Torah says clearly, you're not allowed to eat Chazer. So how could you end up having this type of change? And for this very reason, we saw that there's a whole line of Mefarshim. We quoted 7 or 8 of them, who all interpret this not the way the population said, we're going to maybe do Chazer l'asad. We saw 7 or 8 poskim, starting with Rabbeinu Bechaye, a commentator on the Torah, and we had the Ritzvah, and we had the Rekanti, and the Abba Mori Ayarchi, and the Barbanel, and Radbaz, and the Ur Yekaris, all saying what? We're not eating Chazer l'asad. It's not happening. So what is the meaning of the passage? The Romans, we're going to live with the Romans this way, we're going to live with the Romans that way, the Romans are going to rebuild it. It's a metaphor for them rebuilding the Beis HaMikdash. We're going to have a fish, a kosher fish, and it tastes like chazer. Each one giving their own interpretation or explanation, but all pushing it away. Now, last week we said, 1 second, what about the fact that there's the concept of mitzvahs petelis, loss of law? Mitzvahs are going to be bottled. He says that could perhaps help us understand that maybe chazer kotaka be kosher. As of now, we said no. Why? For two reasons. Number one, the Rashba, and this was alluding to this earlier, mitzvahs teil Vaslavi never happened. It's fake news. Not mitzvahs teil Vaslavi. What does it mean? It means when you die, there's no mitzvahs. Tchias HaMesim and whatever, and all that is 100% mitzvahs. Mitzvahs are forever. They're never stopping. There's no such a thing of a mitzvah being bottled. So if you follow that shitta, we don't have an act. Then the Ritva said, no. There is mitzvahs teil Vaslavi. When? The period when there's going to be Tchias HaMesim, in that period there's no mitzvahs. Why? He says you're living in a world then with no good and no bad, no struggle and whatever. So you don't need mitzvahs, you don't need averis. He did say perhaps we'll do them just like Avraham Avinu didn't need mitzvahs, but he kept them nonetheless. So too we may choose to do it on our own. Interesting point. We're going to come back to that soon. But there's no chiyuv to do the mitzvah.
It's not a finite time. It's infinite once it starts, right?
Correct. Once it starts, unless you say you follow. Yeah, correct. Once it starts, it doesn't stop. Correct. So now, if that's the case, could we be eating chazer in that model? Theoretically, yes. In the Ritva's model, after Tchias HaMesim, maybe we're eating chazer. But here's the problem. The problem is it's not just chazer; it's everything. So why would there be a Midrash saying aset chazer l'ritar? So we're from both ends. We have a little bit of a problem. From one end, you always have to do mitzvah. You can't change it. Tchias HaMesim, even Tchias HaMesim you can't change. Okay, so then we're stuck. That's one end. On the other end. Oh, but Tchias HaMesim is going to change. Okay, so then why the chazer? Let it be everything. Okay, so this is the question that we left off with last week, and we're going to solve that today. But before we do that, we're going to add more voices into the conversation. And that is, there's this conversation about mitzvahs patel sallallahu. We only saw two sources on this question: the Rashba and the Ritva. I want to insert more. It's such a yisaidistic question, Taka. The Rashba said mitzvahs forever, even after Tchias HaMesim. The Ritva said, nah, lav dafka. So what do others say? So I want to specifically look at the Rabbi Yosef Karo, obviously a very, very important voice. He's going to be the first one in text 17. Then the Maharal, very important to hear what he has to say on this subject in text 18. And then the Alter Rebbe in Tanya, what does he have to say on this subject of mitzvahs tel sallallahu in text 19? And then the Rebbe in text 20, what does he have to say on mitzvahs tel sallallahu? But I want to clarify. We're still, after text 20, we're still going to be in the same place pretty much, and that is we're going to be stuck. Because again, if their mitzvahs are forever, so then you can't eat chazer. And if it's going to be bottled by Tchias HaMesim, then it's all of them, not just chazer. So we're going to still be stuck with that question there, but let's work through these sources. Because we raised the question of mitzvahs teil sallallahu, let's go through these sources and see what others have said on this very central question. So we begin, this is more or less an historical sequence, we begin today in text 17 with Rabbi Yosef Karo. Rabbi Yosef Karo, as I mentioned in a previous shir, has a sefer Magid Meishar. It's one of the 4 svarim, I think, that we have from him. And this one is where he has, this is a tkufa of few hundred, he's not the only one. The malach. The malach who's talking to him. Now, I don't have clarity whether it's while he's awake, whether it's in a dream, what it is, and then he writes it down. So this is Shnas Shin Chaf. Shin Chaf is the year 1560, early Yom HaShabbos, so that's Friday night, Chav Vav La'adar Beis. And now I guess this is the voice. Hashem Imcha, God is with you. His malach is saying, Hagam ki na tashtani azavtani, even though you left me. I don't know what those words mean. It sounds like, I have a feeling that those words come up other times in the Sefer, but I didn't check. Okay. Vaha magilna lach raza tamira. And now I will reveal to you a hidden secret. Raza tamira, a hidden secret. B'mai da Amar Rabbanan, with what the Chachamim said, the mitzvahs betelis l'tchias hamesim. So he doesn't use the lashon l'asalav, he uses the lashon tchias hamesim. The Malach is telling Rabbi Yosef Karo that he's going to reveal to him the secret meaning of what does this mean that the mitzvahs are going to be bottled by tchias hamesim. The Hainu l'meimar, when is this going to happen? The bisman tchias hamesim, in the time of tchias hamesim, the ubasa yemais Mashiach, which is after the days of Mashiach, yeicharav alma. The world will be destroyed. Mitayvos v'kisufin the hayalma. From the taivos and kisufin is also a taiva of the hayalma. Okay, what's happening here is there's a very famous passage in the Gemara that says that the world is going to be destroyed after 6,000 years, and you can do an entire shir on that. What does that mean? Because it's coming up, by the way. It's the year 22. It's coming up the year 2240. So now we're 2021. So it's 220 years from now. 219 years from now, the Gemara says that there's going to be, the world exists for 6,000 years, and then in the year 7,000, it's going to be destroyed. So what does it mean? Well, not to say this is the final word on the subject, but Rabbi Yosef Karo is quoting those two words, Charav Alma, and he's saying, he seems to be referencing that, he seems to be interpreting it that the world destroyed from Titus. It's destroyed from the lures of the Nefesh Bahamis and Olam Hazeh. V'haba hu zimna, and at that time Yisbato Yitzhar Ma'alma the Yitzhar is going to be bottled from the world. V'nimtzu mitzvos loisasei b'telis, so the mitzvos loisasei are bottled. V'chein ha-mitzvos hasei, and likewise mitzvos hasei are going to be bottled. Dugmas ma'ida Amar Moshe Rabbeinu all of Hashalom Malachi Ashar is similar to what the Moshe told the Malachim. Ma'ksiv, what does the Torah say? Lo yisirsach, lo yisinov, klum shvichas dam yesh b'nechem, yitzhar yesh b'nechem. What did Moshe Rabbeinu tell the Malachim? You don't need the Torah. Why? You don't have kina. You don't have shvichas damim. Guess what? You can be able to tell that taina to Yidden when they reach the Eretz Chesed. You don't need the Torah. You don't have kina, you don't have shvichas damim, and so therefore the same way the Malachim didn't deserve it till now, we're not going to need it anymore, and so there's going to be mitzvos asay and mitzvos lo asay are going to be batal. So basically, Rabbi Yosef Karo, invoking Kabbalistic ideas, is coming down very strong on the side of the Ritva in this debate, saying that absolute mitzvos are going to be batal in the time of Tchias HaMesim. Maral, living pretty much at the same time, a little after, says as follows: Ma sha'amar mitzvahs b'teiloi, so there's mana tchiyah. When we say mitzvahs batal, it's going to be in the time of tchiyas hamezin. Don't say that the Torah is being nullified. Because if so, because then it should have said the Torah is going to be batal. It doesn't say that. It says the mitzvahs are going to be batal. What does that mean? The Torah is not going to be in the same sprach that it is now. What does this mean? So he explains. Torah is direction for how to live in this world. But in the time of Tchias HaMesim, which is Olam Haba, that is not that we don't need direction for this world. It's not this world, b'chlal. It's a different seder. Therefore, the mitzvahs are going to be bottled in accordance with the new reality, the new world that we're going to have. Nonetheless, this is not called Bittul HaTorah. Because Torah includes everything for all realities. In Torah, really, if we were smart enough and we would pick up the Torah, we'd be able to figure out what the direction is going to be for how to live life in the time of Tchias HaMesim. The bottom line is, I feel like I'm, the Maral is, he's a little meidich in his lashon, but his basic point is absolutely mitzvahs are going to be batal l'aseh because they're not going to be needed in that new reality of l'aseh in this man of Tchias HaMesim. But don't think it means the Torah is batal. Within the Torah, you're going to see new direction and new guidance and new insight for that reality. He actually brings a mashal. He says, just like theoretically you had the Torah giving Yidden guidance in the Midbar, and all the guidance in the Midbar is not relevant to he brings the example of how in the first generation a girl was not allowed to marry out of the Shevet, right? So that was the Torah's guidance in that generation. That wasn't the guidance for later generations. And so he says, Torah has guidance for every single generation. The guidance that we're familiar with today, that's the guidance that is going to be batal l'aseh, but Torah stays relevant. So he doesn't want people to think that Torah, so to speak, you're walking away from Torah. Yid never walks away from Torah, but he is accepting this idea, like the Ritva, that mitzvahs taka b'teilus l'aseh is something that's actually going to happen.
Well, where do we see that Torah has a caveat that it's only talking about our...
At the end of the day, there's a Gemara. The Gemara says mitzvahs b'teilus l'aseh. Now let's go to Tanya. Let's see what the Alter Rebbe says. So Torah Chadasha me'itei teisei would fit. So there is it's a phrase from the Midrash. It's a phrase from the Midrash.
That fits more with Maral, no?
Yes, it does. It fits. Well, you could even say further. Torah Chadasha makes it sound like it's a new Torah, but yeah, right. Where I would say it's not.
There's a different direction. It's our statement.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So that is now you'll see the Alter Rebbe. You're going to see. According to the Maral, in the Zman of Tchias HaMesim, all the Surim are going to be mutter. What does Tanya say?
Maybe there'll be more different Isurim.
He says this about mitzvahs betelos and Yom Tov being batal. It sounds pretty clear from the context that it's going to be permitted to do those things. But you're saying, according to Maral, maybe you'll find out there's new isurim. I don't know. I hear you. I hear the argument. It's a reasonable thing based on the quote we have here. But I think that the pashtus of the Maral was that the mitzvahs are not going to be batal, because that's ultimately what the Gemara says. Now, 19 is the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe also comes down on this same side. Says the Alter Rebbe like this: B'tzeis hashchina miklipas noiga, or nosach achar mea klipas. When we're going to reach the stage that the Shechina leaves klipas, achar shushlam bir anitzaitis, after the era of where we're doing the avodah bir anitzaitis, v'yufra dara mea toiv, and we're going to be living in a time when good and bad are separate. V'yispardu kol b'ha'elav, and all of evil is going to fall apart. V'loy sholta ilana the toiv ra b'tzeis hatoiv mimena, and the Eitz Hadas is no longer going to be in control because the good is going to leave the Eitz Hadas. Azai, he gives a lot of lashonis here for the same idea. He said, Teis hashchina miklipas noiga, that's lashon 1. Bir anitzaisis 2. Yufrod hamei atoiv 3. Yispardu kol pa'elei oven, and the toiv leaving the Eitz Hadas. That's 5 ways of pretty much saying the same thing. Obviously, there's a deal here, but I'm not familiar with what it is. Azai, in that era, lo ye'esak ha'toirav ha'mitzvos levar berurin. We're not going to be doing Torah and mitzvahs to rectify the world and berurin. Ki'im, for a different purpose entirely. What? Liyachid yichudim al yonim yoser. To be miyachid yichudim. Miyachid yichudim is a concept in Kabbalah, and it speaks about why do we do mitzvah. Kabbalah has two general approaches for why we do mitzvahs. Okay, Chassidus, dirvat achtoidim, tafsev chibur. Kabbalah is a different kind of. Kabbalah is what bir and the. It's also because you need to connect Sfiras L'mayla. You connect Sfiras L'mayla dafka through doing an action of a mitzvah l'mata. L'shem yichud kutshu brichu shchinte. So loss of lava, the bir and is gone. We're going to do mitzvahs for what? For yichudim al yonim. Lahamshich eidos al yonim yeser me'atzilus. We're going to draw down eidos higher from atzilus into atzilus, and that's going to be a yichud k'mashukas harita. So according to that, are we going to be doing mitzvahs? Absolutely. What's going to change? Why you do the mitzvah, but not the what. The what of the mitzvah doesn't change. But how can I say that? How could I say we're going to do the mitzvah, but for a different purpose? Chazal said clearly, mitzvah sales hasalave. I know it's chiyas amazing. That's chiyas amazing. Limoisa Mashiach. I was talking in the first paragraph. Limoisa Mashiach. Koydem chiyas amazing. Aim p'telim. It's not going to be bottle. Never then. We're going to be doing it for a different reason. We're going to be doing it for a different purpose. Okay. So, by the way, if you want to have a conversation, the Rebbe said that we're finished avodas habirunim. So, what I need to continue doing mitzvahs for? So, he have an answer. Even if you're a Moisa Mashiach, you continue doing mitzvahs because you're being miyachid yichudim al yonim. Not to speak about the fact that there are probably many other things that we accomplish through our mitzvahs. But what do you think?
The first paragraph is saying
Moshiach.
It's time Mashiach.
Correct.
But in other words, when Messias Mason comes,
Correct. So here we have a full lineup. Let's just summarize what we have so far. You have here, starting with the Ritva, the Rabbi Yosef Karo, the Maharal, the Alter Rebbe and Tanya, all saying mitzvahs teles lasalave. What did the Rebbe have to say on this subject? So text 20.
Not like Rabbi Yosef Karo.
Why? 1 second. You're reading the first paragraph or the second paragraph? Second paragraph, he says, mitzvah sales also love it, chiyas amazing. That's exactly what Yosef Karo said.
Yosef Karo sounded like that the mitzvah's just still going to be there, you're just not going to have to be told to do it.
No, Yosef Karo didn't say that. Yizbadi etzar v'nintu mitzvahs lo yisaseh b'teilus. Chena mitzvahs aseh.
Because my kid lays enough, because there's no Yitzhara.
There's no Yitzhara, you don't need the Torah.
That's not how you understand.
A tzaddik doesn't have to do mitzvahs.
Yeah.
I assumed that he meant that, like, you're not going to be started, you're not going to do anything.
The next line, I took it out. The next line he says, and so therefore on Pesach, of course you're allowed to eat chametz. He says that clearly in the next line.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. So, yeah, he is bringing from the... Now, are we going to kill? No, of course, yeah. That type of thing, for sure not. I think that obviously they would say there's those types of things, for sure we wouldn't do evil. We wouldn't do evil. But I think that is Chazer, they would say it's not evil. Chazer is only that in a flawed world you can do it. But we're not living in a flawed world anymore. So go ahead. I think they would see a difference between those two. Huh? Yeah, maybe that's a way of breaking it down. Something like that.
But
okay.
Somehow that's not mentioned. I don't know.
What? Yeah, I know. That's a good horror. That's why. But that's what threw Binyamin off. was because, based on that last line, he was assuming that, of course you're not killing, so if you're not killing, of course you're not eating chazer, and that's why we had, but yes, it's a good point. I don't have an answer to that.
Besides, what about a tzaddik these days? Someone that doesn't have a yitzhara?
I hear you. You're saying if you follow the argument, so maybe it's, I don't know.
There's no reason to do mitzvahs not to be close.
So we have to wait. We have to wait for the whole era to be this, not the era. Okay. So now, what about the Rebbe? So the Rebbe has in Tafshanum Beis, and as far as I know, the Rebbe didn't speak about this. Like, there's many very famous sikhs, and the Rebbe spoke about what's going to be lost of lava, and the Rebbe spent a lot of time on this. The Rebbe spoke one or two sikhs, and in Tafshanum Beis, in the beginning of the year, they wrote it up as a subject about mitzvahs being batal lava. They wrote it up, and the Rebbe was magiyat, and the Rebbe gave it out as a kuntras. It wasn't connected to any one Shabbos, whatever, just like kuntras.
A few years before.
Yeah, a few years before. It's hard, right? But what's the main akuda of the sikha? I have it over here now.
It's called Ramalchus. That's that one.
No, it didn't come as part of the Dvar Malchus. It was just given out, printed and said. I don't know. So like this, what do you have there? In the Kudla, the Rebbe basically follows the model. Yemoyim Mashiach, we're doing mitzvahs. Yeah, we're doing mitzvahs. It's amazing. Mitzvahs Pil Salasalavi is a problem. It's a problem. Like the Rashba, it's a problem. Why is it a problem? Because it's like this. If you look at the Ritva and the Maharal and all of them, they were thinking about the mitzvah in a very as a means to an end. Put it that way. So it means that if a mitzvah is a tool by which we protect ourselves from evil, if a mitzvah is a tool by which we clean the world, if there's no evil to protect yourself against, and if the world's already clean, what do you need the mitzvah for? So of course it's batal love, it's chizamais, it's what the Alter Rebbe sounds like. It serves no purpose anymore, it serves no use, right? It made sense when you needed it for that. But the Rebbe says, I refuse to look at a mitzvah that way. Why? What's a mitzvah? A mitzvah is a ratzon of Hashem. A ratzon of Hashem is part of the Eibishter himself, and that's something that's infinite. It's not, God looked at the world, it's just a whole different way of looking at a mitzvah. Model number one is, God looked at the world and said, we have a flawed world, what are we going to do? Let's invent a mitzvah to fix the world or to protect people. Okay, then you say it's temporary, you don't need it anymore. That's not a mitzvah. A mitzvah is an inherent part of the Eibishter. Just like you have Eibishter, you have mitzvah. It's one thing, him and his ratzon is one. So God is infinite, his ratzon is infinite. So we can't speak about mitzvahs as being here only to achieve. No, it's embedded. I don't even know. These are interesting. This terminology. I don't know. We have to be really careful. But it's embedded in God's DNA, so to speak. Embedded into His DNA is He wants these 613 things. He's not changing. Those 613 things are not changing either. That's His will.
Why does He
That's
do
His
it
ratzon. What?
Why does He do it Himself?
Why does what?
Why does Hashem do the mitzvahs Himself?
He doesn't. That's because that's Him.
Exactly.
That's exactly. Oh, you bring it. Why is He doing the mitzvah? He's doing the mitzvah to serve as a good role model for us. That's Him. That's the Eibishter. That's it. So how's that ever going away? God's not going away, so that's not going away. So mitzvahs is a big problem. It's a big problem. So what's the solution that the Rebbe says over there? The solution the Rebbe says is like this. Mitzvah means I'm commanding you. I'm commanding you to do something. It means there's me.
That's what I thought you used
He's not. He's not, because he clearly says you can eat chametz on Pesach. Mitzvah is there's me, and there's you, and I am commanding you, which means you don't you want to go to the right. I need to command you to go to the left, and you're going to listen, you're going to be mavatal, you're ratzin to listen to me, and you're going to go the way I told you. That's what a mitzvah, that's what a tzivui is. Mitzvahs b'teil chasalav, there's no mitzvah anymore. Why? We're going to be so in sync with Hashem's ratzin that it's going to, just like we breathe, do you have a mitzvah to breathe? No, I breathe intuitively. That's the way God made me, I breathe. The same way you breathe, you're going to put on tefillin. It's going to be the same thing. It's going to be as natural as that. So there's no mitzvah, it's automatic. And in this, you're able to have both things. We're able to say the mitzvah is batal, in the command is batal, but at the same time, Hashem's ratzon is immutable, is infinite, doesn't change, and
so Chazar won't be.
And now, what the amazing thing is like this, that according to this, you're not eating Chazar. And that's the problem becomes a lot bigger. Okay? So now, let me just present the problem in three ways. If it's the Rashba, you can never eat Chazar. Mitzvah command, you can never eat Chazar. If it's the Rebbe, not mitzvah command, but you are never going to eat Chazar. It's not happening. It's automatic in that. And if it's all the other sources that we had earlier, yeah, mitzvah self also fine, but so is everything else. So why are we choosing the chazer? So we're really stuck now. We don't really have a good solution for this problem.
Whatever that's clearly that he talks about the mitzvah of eating chazer.
And that's sick enough.
What I remember. It spoke about eating chazer at that point, no?
Really?
I think that's how I remember.
In that one?
In the countries, I think.
I thought that was the Sikha on Shavuos, no Aleph. But I may be wrong. Yes, there's one of the Sikhs that speaks about Chazer, and we'll talk about it in a second.
I thought it was the same Sikha now.
Could be. Could be.
It's the same Sikha as
it's not a Sikha, it's a collection of Sikhs.
And it was like all from the same thing, understanding how you eat Chazer. So he doesn't address that.
I believe that's it. The Rebbe does address it. I believe it's the Shavuos Sikha. There are two things that I sometimes get mixed up with. There's Torah Chadosh Mita Teisei, which was Magia for Shavuos Tavshon on Aleph. And then there's Halachas Shel Torah B'Baal Peh Einam Teilin La'asid, or something like that. That's the name of the second Kuntres that came out Tavshon on base. We just quoted from the second one. I think, I'm not 100% sure, I think the Chazer, the Rebbe referenced in Torah Chadosh Mita Teisei Shavuos Tavshon on Aleph, and we'll talk about it in a second. Yeah. So what's the solution for this thing? There are two solutions. Oh, well, before we go to the solutions, it's sort of interesting. The Rebbe is not assigned to the Ritva, but the Ritva is the one who said, maybe just like Avraham Avinu did mitzvahs, we're going to continue doing mitzvahs in the time of Tchias HaMesim. He said that, and what's really beautiful about that is Chassidus teaches why was Avraham Avinu doing the mitzvahs? He did. How would he know? Because you're Merkavah Hashem, automatically you do, right? So it actually fits perfectly what the Rebbe says. That I don't believe the Rebbe is Messiah in order to that Ritva, but it's a very nice earlier source for this concept. Okay, so what's going to be the answer? So first, let's talk to the Ritva. We're right now going to talk to the Ritva, the whole school, which is the Ritva, Rabbi Yosef Karo, the Maral, the Alter Rebbe. We're talking to them. Chazer also. What are you talking about? You're talking about Tchias HaMesim. Everything is. So why are you saying Chazer? What's one answer to that would be, and this seems to be what the Yavit says. You're right. It's even Chazer. You have to add the word even. Why? And someone mentioned this last class. Someone mentioned, I don't remember who. So that Chazer, for whatever reason, became the symbol of the epitome of a davar aser, and so what we mean is even Chazer, but everything. Who seems to be saying this? The Yavitz. The Yavitz is one of the sources that says, absolutely, we're eating Chazer L'Asalav, just like I showed you, we had the Ma'orei, Meir Popadosh HaKoyen, the Ma'orei Ur, doing so in the 1600s. So the Yavitz in the 1700s writes as follows. This is in his Siddur. Yeda HaMa'ayin, text 21, he says, let the person who's investigating know, Ki kol Baalei Achayim, all animals, even those that are not kosher, yeshla and makbil, they have something that corresponds, or a shoyrish or a source, they have some shaychus to kedusha. Why is this negate to Perek Shir? Perek Shir is a medrash that has all the animals singing Hashem's praises. And so therefore he's talking about this. Yeah, there's some source for holiness in each of these. Hadugma mufarsemes, the famous example is Pnei Aryeh, Pnei Nesher, Shab Markava. We have a lion and an eagle, both non-kosher animals, and in the Navi's prophecy, he sees them in God's Kisei HaKavod. So obviously you see that there's a Shoyrish in Kedusha. Mehem Takish Lish'ar, but don't say it's only those two. From there you should derive to all that every single animal has a Shoyrish in Kedusha. Va'afilu achazir. Here's the word. You see that key word? Afilu. Even the Chazer. Amar Azal. Hashem says that He's going to bring it back to us. So that's I see Him saying here. It's even the Chazer is coming back to us. Why? How could the Chazer come back to us? Oh, because that's a Shoyrish Kedusha. That's a Shoyrish Kedusha. So once you're Matzliach to be Megala, the Shoyrish Kedusha, then we have a thing. Now, what's the even? So he explains. Because it's such a tamadik animal, it has no tikkun today. There's no tikkun for the chazer today. Then it's going to work. Scientists say a pig can't look up at the sky. Because he fell deep into klippa, v'toik of dinov, and very deep into the concept of din, which is also the klippa. This is why Many animals are in Perek Shira. Each one, the horse sings Hashem's praises, the camel sings Hashem's praises, all these non-kosher animals, because they all have a Shaydish and Kedusha. But you know who's not there? The Chazer is not there, because he fell the lowest. He fell the lowest. And there's nothing that a person could do today that could somehow elevate it. This is despite the fact that that his stomach, the anatomy of a pig's stomach, is similar to a human being. This is very interesting because we know that heart valves they take from humans. So there is some anatomy things with a pig that is more similar to human beings than anything else. He here talks about the stomach. And the eyes of the pig are similar to the monkey's pigs, so that's also close to a human being. It has one siman of tara. He shows you his hoofs because they're split. So even though it looks like it's close, it looks close to a human being and it has one siman, Aval Bikain is really the lowest of the low, which is why it's not represented in Perek Shira. And Aval Bikain, even that's going to come back to Asad Lavai. So this is that way. You take the Ritva of their whole school, Mitzvah Tales for Asad Lavai, Chazer, Asad Litar, Afilu Chazer. That would be the approach of the Yavitz for that. However, as we mentioned, what would we do with the Sikha the Rebbe? For example, the Sikha the Rebbe says you're never eating the Chazer or Asad Lavai. So here, the Rebbe addressed this in the earlier years in the Nesias as a letter, and the Rebbe says like this: Omer Azal, Chazal say, and the Rebbe says, I give the sources for this in the Maimer of Maim Rabim Tofreish Lamed Vav. Lama Nikra Shmoi Chazer. Yeah, the Rebbe wrote Ha'aris to Maim Rabim Tofreish Lamed Vav, and there this concept is brought. So the Rebbe wrote Ha'ara of where it is. Lama Nikra Shmoi Chazer. Why is it called Chazer? Lachzir Elanu, because God's going to bring it back to us. Muchach, from here you could prove the Gamal Shafam Var Neves Yisharu B'Yisuran. If you take this literally, the Yavit said it's all animals. Why Chazer? Even Chazer. The Rebbe says no, it doesn't sound that way. Lama Nikra Shmoi Chazer, it's coming back. From there you could prove the other animals are not coming back. So what's going on? Earlier it says that earlier in the Rebbe quoted the teaching that mitzvahs are going to be batal lasalavai kevavur, because it's explained the shnei zman lasalavai. There's two periods. Kishiyah dayin aser v'tamei. There's going to be a time when things are mutter and aser. Va'oz rak chazer yitar. Then only the chazer is going to be mutter. Everything else is going to remain. And then you're going to reach a later stage, the stage of Tchiyas HaMesim, when everything else is going to become mutter. So now you have a second answer. Yagda's answer is even chazer. The Rebbe's answer over here is Mitzvah says Hasalavi. That's then. That's everything. This is earlier. This is unique. From everything else, all mitzvahs are the same. This is going to be one. This is going to be the only one and only change in the earlier era of the chazer is going to become a mutter. And that would explain why we're stressing the chazer. Now, the problem is, how? How is it going to become mutter l'asalavi? If mitzvahs aren't batal, how? What's the mechanism? Hayrasha, but permanent. How are we going to... So the Rebbe doesn't explain here. But in the Sikha that you were referencing before, the Rebbe quotes a teaching from Rebbe Menachem Azariah Fano and Urachai. The first one to say this is Menachem Azariah Fano. He's a Makubal who's living in the 1500s in Italy. He's mamish the same generation as the Arizal, and he has a number of Kabbalah Svarim, and he writes this there. God is going to change the nature of the pig. Today it only has split hooves. It's eventually going to start chewing its cud. The Torah says it doesn't chew its cud, which sounds like it will never chew its cud in the Hebrew. No, unlike the kimchi, it does not mean in the future it won't. It just means a verb that is happening now or happened in the past. One second. And if you look at Targum Onkelos on the pasuk, it makes this clear. I looked at Targum Onkelos. I don't remember exactly what the deal was there, but the point is, it's not future tense. It's about what's happening now. It doesn't chew his cud. That's something that's going to change lots of. Who's the Kimchi? B'Pashas is we always think Kimchi is the Radak, the David Kimchi. I checked the Radak on this pasuk. It doesn't say anything, so I'm not sure what the reference is. And all the Svarim that I looked at, no one tells me where this is or who this Kimchi is. So that's the thing. That's Menachem Azario Fanu. Or Chaim in his commentary on the Torah says the same thing. Who gave lo Yigor Pirush Shnayu Adavar. So the Chaim learned. You want to know why you can't eat the chazer? Because v'hu geiru lo yigor. That's why you can't eat it. Which means kol zman shu lo yigor, you're not allowed to eat it. Aval asad lo v'yala geira. Then it's going to chew its cud. V'yachzer li is mutter. Then it's going to become mutter. V'loy she'ishar b'loy geira v'yutar. Not that it's going to be mutter without chewing its cud. Ki toira loy teshuna toira is not changing. And in the footnote I bring that the Ben Yoyada, who's the Ben Ish Chai, says the same thing, and the Sam Sefer says the same thing. This became the answers. All of a sudden now, you could say, why did it say Daske Chazer and nothing else? So use the first letter of the Rebbe. Because everything else is later. This is an earlier period. How is it going to be mutter in the earlier period? Because the nature of it is going to change. And now this solves the problem also. The Rebbe says nothing's bottled even in Chiyas HaMesim. In a Chavim. Hashem's Ratzon is that we're not going to eat a Chazer that's Lo Yigor. That's his Ratzon. And that Ratzon is not changing, and we're going to always follow that Ratzon. But the mitzvos of the Chazer is going to change, and so therefore we're going to be able to eat it. So these are essentially if you take a step back, you're like, okay, so if you ask the question, are we going to be eating a Chazer or Lavai? It's like, well, you're like, whoa, it depends who you ask almost. It's like you had the denier. You had last week, we mentioned, that Rabbi Shmuel Ashkenazi, the Yefei Toyar, said there's no such a Midrash. And so therefore there was no such a concept, so complete denial. Or you had the many people who said, yeah, there is a passage in Midrash, but it doesn't mean anything to do with a chazer. It means to do with Rome or whatever it is, or a fish, or a metaphoric meaning. So according to them, they would say, no. But then you did have sources that say, yeah, there is a chazer. And so we ended up with this problem of how do you deal with that? Maybe nothing is changing, ever, or everything is changing. And so our solution was, one, that maybe it's the even chazer, the Yavitz's approach, or it's no, because it's an earlier period, and it's changing through the device and mechanism of the chazer changing on its own. And now I just want to remind you, we started this all off because the Alter Rebbe mentions it in a mimer, and then the Tzemach Tzedek sent us to 3 different sources because it is complicated trying to figure out where the source for this idea was, and he mentioned those 3 sources that we saw in text 1. Now, one more thing. There's an article that Rabbi Bleich wrote I guess this was in Tradition magazine in the 1980s, and then it was subsequently printed in his book Contemporary Halachic Problems. Rabbi Bleich is a Rav in Manhattan. He's a very big Talmid Chacham and a shtickle Posek. And he's not a Chiddush guy. He's a very strong Litvak. So he basically wrote what happened. So he writes over there,
Traditions like modern Orthodox.
Yeah. So he writes over there an overview of the following. In 1986, there was a scientific journal that reported that in Malaysia they identified a type of a pig. If I'm pronouncing it right, it's a Barabosa, but I may be pronouncing it wrong, but you go on Google, you'll figure it out. A Barabosa pig. It's a pig, has all the anatomy, the DNA of pig. It's a variation. There are many different families of pigs. And the scientists were watching it, and they saw it was chewing its cud. And so it's a ruminant. And this is the first one, so this is important in scientific journals. Right away, in the rabbinic journals, they started asking, are you allowed to eat it? So the poskim weighed in on this subject. And some people were like, well, maybe this is Asik Chazer L'Torah, and we have those sources that the nature is going to change. Maybe that's it. Maybe the nature is changing, and so it should be mutter. But on the other hand, you get into the other question of, we're very into Mesorah, you can't eat a kosher thing without Mesorah. You don't have Mesorah for something like that, right? And there's also the issue of its ancestry, because an animal that has kosher samanim, but whose ancestry is not kosher, is a halachic problem. So I didn't follow the whole thing. They wrote all over. They wrote about this, And then, after all the different sides weighed in, as far as I know, the Rebbe never didn't say anything about this. This was in 1986, I think. Then, like 6 months later, same scientific journal, I don't think it was a retraction, but they basically said that after further study, they realized that it was exhibiting activity similar to rumination, but it was not actual rumination. So while it was moving its mouth, rumination is when it lowers the food and then brings it back up. It wasn't. So that was just an interesting tasting of you, if you will, of this concept.
Good.
Yeah. Now, what was your shaila?
Two things. First is the pasuk that Rav Nachum, whatever the Panim, he takes from Ruber Lashikar, saying something that's a present tense in Torah, saying that it's only present and not future.
No, this is right now. Follow up. We'll finish this in 10 minutes.
We see that in Torah that a lot of times it says something in present. And then Rashi says this means that even till today, like let's say a name of a city or something like that, and that shows that Torah can know the future. So that is completely different than the pasuk saying that somehow it's only present and not future.
Yeah, I hear you. I can't. I don't know. Okay, so related subject that we'll do quickly an overview of is there is a passage in Midrash that says all of the Yom Tovim are going to be batal limois Hamashiach except for Purim. There are a few sources and variations of this Midrash that say Hanukkah too, but in the majority of cases it says Purim. So this Shaila, well, based on everything that we know now, what do we do with that? How are we going to make that work? So you could almost predict. I'll tell you the person, and you'll be able to tell me what he's going to say. So the first is the Rashba. He's source number one. The Rashba's asked about this. What's going to be the deal? So what's the Rashba? Is the Rashba going to accept this literally? Is Rashba going to accept this literally? No, the Rashba can't accept this literally. He didn't accept mitzvos betelis laws and law literally. He's not accepting this literally. So what does he explain? He says, "Kol mitzvos betelis" is like this. Hashem is making a promise that all the Yom Tovim, in one generation you're going to have Antiochus, another one you're going to have a Hitler, another you're going to have a Stalin, another you're always going to have someone, and they're going to make it schwer for Yidden to observe certain Yom Tov. Hashem's promising that throughout the long Galus, the one Yom Tov that they're never going to stop us from observing is Purim. That's it. Kol HaMoedes is going to be batal, means that, through persecution is going to be batal for a few years, some years, whatever, 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years. Purim is never going to be. So the Manas Halevi, who wrote I think it's the Manas Halevi. I gave
Maybe he said COVID started.
I thought I put a footnote here. I guess it didn't come out. Yeah, sure, very much so. The Rebbe's approach is somewhere because on the one hand the Ratzon of Hashem is staying the same, and we're doing mitzvahs throughout, but at the same time there is an element of bittul. There's no word tzivah, so it is somewhere in the middle. Okay, so the Rashba basically, his opinion is you have a metaphoric meaning to this idea of mitzvah sales also. So I was telling you, the Manas Halevi was a commentary written in the 1500s on the Megillah Esther. He quotes this and he says, Rashba, the reality is that there were generations where Yidden couldn't keep Purim also because of Gzeidus. So he says this explanation doesn't work. But that's the explanation that the Rashba does. The Radvaz, if you go to source number 2, the Radvaz was asked the same question. What's Taich? So he says, also, did we have Radvaz in Kosher Pig? We did. What did Radvaz say about Kosher Pig? He said, what we had it. He said, what did Radvaz say? He's like, no. What does Chazer mean, lost lover? Remember? He said, we're going to eat whatever. We're going to have so much joy. Mashiach comes, he's going to feel as if we're eating Chazer. Okay? So that's what he said there. So what's he going to say here? Same idea. He's like, bottle, the Yom Tov is going to be bottle. Today, Pesach's a big deal. Oh, all weeks are difficult weeks. You have a beautiful Pesach. All weeks difficult week, you have a beautiful Purim. Then, you'll see in a second. No, Mashiach comes, every day is going to be a Yom Tov. It's going to be Mighty Diksa. Every day is a Yom Tov. I Purim. She says Purim. She's like, then you're going to remember. You're going to remember how Haman tried killing all of us, and so that's going to cause us cause us to feel and we're going to want to celebrate even when Mashiach comes. It's going to feel different from a regular Tuesday. So he's like, okay, but what about Pesach? Pare tried killing us, so why is that same thing? He says, no, because that's so long ago we forgot it. Based on Mikdash Rishon, we forgot about the whole pain and everything, so therefore it's not going to bother us. But Purim is still going to, so to speak, bother. Okay, so you see what they're doichets, right? These are what we would call doichets, but it's coming from within that worldview that doesn't want to doesn't want to tolerate this idea that maybe mitzvahs are going to be batal asalavi. You have the Labar Benel. I'm going to skip the Maharal. Okay, the Maharal. If you go to text 5, what does he say? He says mitzvahs teil asalavi. In text 5, he says it means in the time of Tchias Hamezim. That's what it is. So now his question is so why Purim? Why Purim is going to stay? And there's also, by the way, some versions say, I mentioned before Hanukkah, some versions say Yom Kippur. So he says, Purim and Yom Kippur, the theme is Tchias Hamezim. Purim, we were supposed to die. Yom Kippur is Tshuva. It's also the idea of death. So, because the theme is Tchias Hamezim, so in the era of Tchias Hamezim, we're going to be keeping it. But the point is, he's consistent. Mitzvah Telas L'Asalava is when Mashiach comes. And when Mashiach comes, you're not keeping the Yom Tovim, except for Purim and Yom Kippur, because they fit the theme of Tchias Hamezim, but other than that, we're not keeping. Now, Rabbi Yosef Karo says a very interesting thing. Remember, he said Mitzvah Telas L'Asalava, and he accepted it. And he said, yeah, when Tchias Hamezim happens, it's Telas. So in this passage, he goes on to say, with Yom Tov, what's going to happen Yom Tov? No Isser Chametz, he says. No problem, no Isser Chametz. The only thing we're going to be doing? Saying Hallel. Hallel you're going to do. Praising Hashem you're going to do. The Isurim we're not going to have anymore. But the Hallel for Hashem that you're going to have. That's what we mean. Chutz Purim. How do we celebrate Purim? Purim, you read the Megillah, which is a form of Hallel. So that's for every Yom Tov. Pesach you're going to say Hallel. Purim you're going to say Hallel. Hanukkah you're going to say Hallel. What does he say about matzah? I think he says.
You don't eat the matzah.
He says that clearly.
I'm guessing.
Yeah. He says, Yeah, he says it clearly in the first line. Matzah, all that is to break tumah. We don't need to break tumah anymore. So you see, again, he fits very well into his model. The Sefer Ikrim I'm going to skip because he doesn't fit into any of the models that we were talking about. Then you have Chassidus, the mimer of the Rebbe, where the Rebbe basically learns. He actually brings the answer of the Radvaz. And he shlugs it up. He says it's not a proper answer to say that it's because of Simcha. Because what about Yom Kippur? So why are we going to be celebrating Yom Kippur? In other words, the Radvaz, he brings the Radvaz's answer. He seems to struggle with it, and then he says, according to Chassidus, the beer basically is every Yom Tif is a Gilui Or. That Gilui Or is going to be bottled. Lagabe the Gilui Or that's going to be when Mashiach comes. Purim in Yom Kippur is a Gilui Or that's even higher than what happens when Mashiach comes, which is why those are going to be. So if you ask, are you keeping the laws? So remember, in the Rebbe's model, you're always keeping the laws. You're always keeping the laws.
That's right. Bottle
right?
doesn't mean.
Bottle just means
the ikr is
that the
higher.
Or is not as strong. So the point is, whatever you saw before about the Chazer and about Mitzvah Seil Salavai corresponds pretty perfectly with what each person says about how they translate this Maimer Chazal about Hamoyadim B'Telim. In the Rebbe's model, Hamoyadim B'Telim is not affecting practice at all. Not affecting practice at all. There are those who want to say Mitzvah Seil Salavai in a way that it affects practice. So according to them, it affects practice. Mitzvah Seil Salavai, so you're not keeping any of the dinim. Purim and Yom Kippur, so you need to deal with it. Rabbi Yosef Karo is a very interesting way of dealing it. Purim, you're only halal. That's the only thing we're going to be doing. And then you have the complete deniers who say no, everything's staying exactly the same, and so we give some sort of metaphoric meaning to this. And that's like the Rashba and the Radvaz.
So the Rebbe's explanation is basically significance.
Significance. Yeah. Now the Ikrim, just one thing I didn't mention. The Ikrim is a very interesting shitta. The Ikrim disagrees with the Rambam. The Rambam speaks about the eternity of Torah and mitzvahs. The Ikrim disagrees. And the Ikrim basically says that if theoretically we had another situation that's like Matan Torah, then things could change. But it has to be that level. It has to be that level of Matan Torah. Which means all of us have to hear God, so to speak, say it. And he says, yeah, it's possible when Mashiach comes, before Tchias Mesa, Mashiach comes, that's going to happen. And if so, totally fine or whatever. So he's very open to the So Rambam has as one of his certain principles that it can't change. He's like, well, no, it could change. It just has to be changed in the right way. And that's the Ikrim's shit on this. Anyway, so that's enough for pigs, and that's enough for, I didn't want to come back. I just wanted to integrate the youngsters into this.
That's 22 over here in the kosher pigs. That's from the Rebbe. Is this Shabbat?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a little bit different than his shit in the Maimer and the Sukkah. It seems like it's going to be like, he's kind of like a shop. You're going to be able to eat,
in 20, all that Rebbe is saying in 22 is how do you have a situation where Chazer is mutter and nothing else is? So Rebbe says, because you wait for Mashiach. But the Rebbe in 22 does not explain how. We need to have a device, a legal device. What is the legal device by which it becomes mutter then? So the truth is, the Ikrim give you another one, that God is going to reveal himself, like Matan Torah, and going to tell us. But the Rebbe never used that. So that's why 22, to me, fits very well with 23 and 24, both of which the Rebbe said in later years. The Rebbe mentioned this in the Kosher, right?
Yeah, okay.